Captain Elias Ward stood still as the Jarrell soldiers marched past him. Their armor was tall and shining, carved with strange alien symbols. They didn't even look at him. He was the only human in the base on Vector 9, a frozen moon under the control of the Jarrell Empire. The cold wind hit his face, but he didn't flinch. Elias wore old, scratched human armor. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't advanced, but it had protected him for years. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here for peace talks between Earth and the Jarrell. But it was clear the Jarrell didn't want him here. The doors of the command hall opened. Inside stood Commander Ciro Velton. She was tall and proud, with violet skin and sharp silver eyes. Her armor sparkled with energy shields, her long braid tied tight behind her head. She didn't bow. She didn't greet him. She just looked him up and down like he was a child wearing his father's boots. "So," she said coldly, "this is what Earth sends? A rusted can of meat." Elias said nothing. He stood straight. "You hide inside that armor like a frightened animal. Are you planning to fight or beg?" she asked. "I'm here to observe," Elias said calmly, "and to help if I'm needed." Ciro laughed, a short, cruel sound. "We don't need help from humans." Suddenly, alarms rang out across the base. A rogue faction had broken through the outer perimeter. Small attack ships had landed nearby. Sphera and her team rushed toward the launch bay. Elias followed silently. Ciro turned to him. "This is not your fight, Terran. Stay out of our way." Elias didn't answer. He just walked to the weapons rack, picked up a basic pulse rifle, and followed the team outside. The battle was fast and brutal. The rogue faction was strong, but not organized. Ciro's soldiers fought with great skill, but they were losing ground. One of the patrol units was pinned near a frozen cliff. A large creature from the moon's surface had been awakened by the gunfire and attacked both sides. Elias saw the danger from a distance. He didn't wait for orders. He moved quickly, using the terrain to his advantage. He climbed the cliff's side, jumped down behind the creature, and fired at a weak spot in its neck. The beast roared and fell. The pinned soldiers got up and ran to safety. Ciro saw what had happened but said nothing. Elias didn't expect thanks. He just nodded and returned to the edge of the battlefield. When the fight was over, the base returned to silence. The wounded were treated. The dead were honored. Ciro called for a meeting in the main hall. Elias stood to the side, waiting quietly. The room was filled with Jarrell officers. They praised Ciro, cheered the victory, and ignored the human who had helped save their team. Then Ciro spoke out. This victory came at a cost. And strangely, with help from an unexpected source, her eyes turned toward Elias. "Captain Ward, you were brave," she said, but her voice was sharp, not kind. "But it wasn't human skill that saved anyone. It was luck. Even a broken weapon can fire once." Elias didn't react. She stepped closer. "Do you wear that armor like it means something? But we know what humans are. Soft, weak. You wear armor not to fight, but to hide." The room fell quiet. Sarah crossed her arms. "Tell me, human, what are you without that suit of metal?" Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then without saying a word, he reached up and unfastened the locks on his armor. Piece by piece, he removed the suit. First the chest plate, then the arms, then the helmet. He placed them gently on the floor. He stood there in simple gray fabric beneath. No shields, no weapons. There were scars on his arms, a burn mark on his neck. His boots were cracked, and his hands rough from years of work. He looked just like a man, tired, plain, unimportant. And then he turned. He walked past her, past the officers, past the heavy doors. He stepped outside into the freezing wind. The guards didn't stop him. No one spoke. Ciro stared after him. Where is he going? One soldier whispered. No one answered. Elias walked into the snowy distance. No armor, no protection. Just a human walking forward. Captain Elias Ward did not stop walking. He left the Jarrell base behind him as the icy winds blew across the surface of Vector 9. The frozen moon was silent and dangerous. Sharp rocks poked out of the snow, and deadly cracks ran through the ground like hidden traps. There was no sun here, only a dim blue light from the gas giant in the sky. He had no armor, no weapons, just simple boots, a gray uniform, and a thick mind trained by years of hardship. Inside the base, the Jarrell officers were confused. Commander Sierra Velton stood near the large window in the control tower, staring out into the wasteland. She didn't say anything. She was the one who had pushed him, insulted him, and yet the human had said nothing back. He had simply walked away. "Commander," one officer said. "Should we send someone after him?" "There," Sierra shook her head. "If he is as strong as he wants us to believe, he'll come back." The officer hesitated. "If he doesn't?" "Then Earth has lost a fool," she said, but her voice wasn't as strong as before. Hours passed, then a day. Then two. Everyone in the base thought the human would die within a few hours, but he didn't. The scanners picked up faint movement. One life form slowly making its way across the ice fields. It was him. Captain Elias Ward. Still walking, he hadn't stopped. A few Jarrell technicians began secretly watching his progress. They zoomed in with drones, surprised by what they saw. He had built a simple shelter using broken rock and ice. He'd caught a small animal, a 6-legged snow creature, and cooked it over a tiny fire made from his emergency heat pack and scraps of metal he had found. He moved slowly, but always forward. He avoided danger not with power, but with cleverness. He walked around sinkholes, waited out blizzards, and even avoided a large predator by hiding under ice sheets until it passed. By the third day, the story had spread through the base. "Humans still alive," a young cadet said. "No armor, no food, no weapons," another replied. "How is that possible?" In the training hall, one instructor paused during a lesson. "Maybe he's not weak. Maybe he's trying to show us something." Commander Sierra overheard these talks. She didn't say anything, but she watched the screen in her office every night. Alone, quiet, the human moved like a ghost across the moon, leaving only footprints and silence behind. One night, her second-in-command entered her office, still watching him. Sierra didn't turn. "He's stubborn. That's all. Or maybe he's brave." Sierra narrowed her eyes. Bravery without purpose is useless. But he's showing them something. The soldiers, they're starting to respect him. Sierra didn't reply. On the 5th day, Elias reached the edge of a dangerous area known as the Frost Maze. It was a natural trap, made of ice caves and deep trenches. Jarrell legends said only true warriors could cross it. But in the past, it was used to test young soldiers before they were allowed to lead squads. The scanners showed Elias standing at the entrance of the maze. "He's going in," a voice said. "In the control room? No human's ever done that," another replied. Commander Sierra arrived just in time to see him step inside. No armor. "And he's still moving forward," she said softly. Inside the maze, Elias walked carefully. The ground was slippery, and the walls of the caves moved with time and heat. He used his hands to hold onto the walls, and sometimes crawled on all fours. When the paths were too narrow, his hands bled.
Ow.
His breath came out in clouds of frost. But he didn't stop. He found a small cave and slept there for a few hours. Then he moved again. Back at the base, the soldiers were no longer laughing at the human, were cheering him on silently as if watching a hero on a journey. On the 6th day, one of the Jarrell patrol teams went out to investigate strange signals near the edge of the Frost Maze. The patrol was small, just 3 soldiers. But the ground shook suddenly, and a large piece of ice broke under them. They fell into a trench and could not climb out. The team sent out a distress signal. The base tried to reach them, but the signal was weak. Commander Sierra planned to send a rescue team. But before they could launch, something unexpected happened. One of the drones showed a figure approaching the trench. It was Elias. He had changed direction. He had heard the distress signal on his emergency radio and turned back, despite being wounded, tired, and unarmed. The screen in the control room showed him lowering a rope made from torn parts of his uniform. He tied it to a nearby ice anchor and helped the soldiers climb out one by one. One soldier had a broken leg. Elias carried him across the frozen path. Back at the base, everyone watched in silence. Sira clenched her jaw, but her voice was quiet. He went into the maze. He survived. And he rescued our own. Her second-in-command nodded. Without armor, Sira didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "What kind of man does that?" Captain Elias Ward carried the injured Jarrell soldier across the icy path. His arms shook with every step, but his feet stayed strong. The injured soldier's skin was frozen blue, his breathing heavy, but Elias didn't stop. The others followed. Closely, still surprised that a human unarmed, and wounded, was leading them to safety. By the time they reached the edge of the maze, a Jarrell recovery team was waiting. The soldiers rushed forward to help their own, but their eyes were locked on the human. Elias didn't speak. He simply set the injured warrior down, gave a short nod, and turned back toward the ice fields again. Commander Sira Velton watched the entire scene from the base tower. Her expression was unreadable. No one dared to speak until she finally said, "He should have come back with them. It's not gone forward." But her voice held no anger. It was softer, now more thoughtful. In the following days, talk of Elias spread. Across the entire moon base, young warriors in the training halls whispered his name. Engineers paused their work to replay drone footage. Veterans sat in silence, rethinking what they believed about humans. One day, a soldier asked out loud, "If that human doesn't fight with weapons, what does he fight with?" Another answered quietly, "Willpower." By now, Elias had entered, an area the Jarrell called the Proving Grounds. Long ago, this region was used for final trials. It tested warriors in many ways, not just strength, but patience, courage, and survival. It was said that only the greatest Jarrell champions had passed through the Proving Grounds without aid. No one had used it in years. Now, a human walked. There, Sarah stood at the command center, staring at the map. Is he going there by choice? Or is he just lost? Her second-in-command replied, "He's not lost. He's moving with purpose. The way he walks, chooses shelter, changes course, it's all careful. He's not wandering. He's proving something." Sira folded her arms. Proving what? That he doesn't need us. Maybe. That we were wrong about him. Inside the Proving Grounds, Elias faced new challenges. The ground became sharper, filled with black ice and jagged rocks. The temperature dropped even lower. Strange echoes bounced off canyon walls. In the distance, glowing red eyes appeared. And night predators built by the Jarrell during the old warrior tests. Elias did not fight them with power. He moved silently, made false trails, and set distractions. He used sound and light to confuse the beasts. Sometimes he stayed hidden in the cold for hours, just waiting for them to leave. His body grew weaker, but his mind stayed clear. Every breath was hard. Every step burned. But he kept going. Back at the base, a group of cadets watched the screens closely. One of them spoke. "He's not like us. But he's doing something even our own champions feared." Another replied, "He's walking a path not meant for humans." The first cadet answered, "Maybe that's the point." Sira watched quietly from her private room. She didn't show her feelings, but inside her mind, she questioned everything she had said about Elias. He didn't argue, didn't demand respect. He didn't speak of honor or pride. He just walked. He just did. Then came a storm. Not just snow, but a full electrical storm. Rare, but deadly. Lightning danced across the sky. Icy winds screamed through the rocks. Even the drones couldn't follow. Clearly, the signal was lost for several hours. Everyone feared the worst. But when the storm passed, the satellite picked up a heat signal again, still moving. Still alive, the screen showed Elias dragging his own leg, injured and bleeding from a cut across his forehead. His clothes were torn, but he had tied them with pieces of frozen bark. He had made a walking stick from old bones left by some ancient predator. He didn't look like a soldier anymore. He looked like something older, something harder, like a Legend. Back at the base, silence filled every room. No one mocked him now. No one laughed at the human in old armor. In fact, they had stopped calling him human. They simply called him Elias. Commander Sira stood outside the base walls that night. She looked toward the distant, frozen lands, where a man walked alone through ice and danger. She didn't understand him fully, but she respected him now, for the first time in her life. Respected a TR. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A young Jarrell scout burst into the command room. Commander, she said, one of our patrols was following the edge of the proving grounds. They saw something. What? They saw Elias. He's standing at the old trial pillars. Sira's eyes widened. The trial pillars were the center of the proving grounds, where only those who passed all challenges were allowed to place a banner. Centuries ago, Jarrell champions placed theirs there. No outsider had ever touched it. He's not, Sira began. Yes, the scout said. He's raising something. A new banner made from torn cloth, burned armor straps, and a broken beacon. Not as a challenge, but as a quiet message. A flag made from pain and survival. A symbol of a man who walked without armor and didn't break. The old trial pillars stood tall like frozen statues, carved long ago by Jarrell champions. Their sharp edges reached for the sky, surrounded by the cold silence of the proving grounds. No one had come this far in decades, but now a human had reached them. Elias Ward stood at the center, his clothes torn and frozen stiff. Blood stained his hands and temple, but his eyes were calm. He took a deep breath and raised the small banner he had made, just strips of cloth tied to a broken stick. There were no bright colors, no symbols of power, only quiet strength and survival. Back at the Jarrell base, every soldier stared. At the live drone feed, the wind howled across the ice, but the banner held firm. For many, it felt like they were witnessing history. Commander Sira Velton watched from the command deck. She did not speak. Her silver eyes remained on the screen. Her second-in-command stood beside her. He planted a banner, he said. Softly, Sira nodded. Without permission, without honor, but with truth. Sira didn't reply. Her face was calm, but her mind was spinning. This human had no rank among them, no title, no armor. Yet he had reached a place even some Jarrell warriors feared, and now he had claimed it. Later that day, an alert echoed through the base. A Jarrell scout team, sent to retrieve sensor data near the lower cliffs, had been caught in a sudden avalanche. They were alive, but trapped beneath a heavy wall of ice and rock. The rescue crew was delayed too far to reach them in time. There was only one person. Close enough, Elias Ward. The control tower tracked his signal. He was already moving, climbing down toward the distress zone, even before they called for help. No one had asked him. He had just gone. Sira clenched her jaw. Get me visuals. The screen changed. Okay. A drone showed Elias making his way across. Broken stone and ice, his limp worse now, but his pace steady. The trapped soldiers were deep in a narrow gorge. A fallen ice wall had blocked both ends. Their oxygen was running low. Heat was fading fast. One of the soldiers activated his emergency beacon then. They heard footsteps above it first. They thought it was a Jarrell rescue team, but it was Elias. He climbed down slowly, tying a rope made from old vines and climbing gear he'd crafted himself. His hands were shaking. He was exhausted. He didn't stop. When he reached the edge of the cave-in, he shouted through the ice, "Hold on, I'm coming." The soldiers were shocked. The human, he's alone. Still, hope returned to their voices. Elias began digging with his bare hands and a sharpened rock. Bit by bit, he broke through the ice. His fingers bled. His breath came heavy. But he kept going. At the base, soldiers gathered silently around the screens. One cadet whispered, "Why does he keep helping us, after how we treated him?" Another said, "Maybe because we didn't break him. We revealed him." After nearly 2 hours, Elias opened a hole wide enough to reach them. One by one, he pulled the soldiers out. One was unconscious. Another had a broken arm. The last one had frostbite. Elias wrapped them in the remains of his thermal cloth and used his own body heat to keep them warm. He built a small fire using dry bark and oil-soaked bandages. He had nothing left to give. But he still gave. When the Jarrell's rescue team finally arrived, they found Elias sitting beside the fire. One soldier resting on his chest, another leaning on his shoulder. His eyes were barely open, but he was awake. Alive Commander Sira arrived by dropship moments. Later, she stepped into the gorge and stared at the scene. No one said anything. Elias looked up at her slowly. She looked at the soldiers, all alive because of him. Then her eyes went to the human's torn body. His skin was cracked from cold. His feet were bleeding through his boots. His clothes were almost frozen to his body, but still, he sat upright, proud, silent. Sira stepped forward. The old her might have insulted him, might have called it luck or foolishness. But this Sarah had changed. She dropped to one knee beside him and looked into his eyes. "You saved my soldiers," she said softly. Elias didn't respond. His lips were dry and cracked. Sira took off one of her gloves and reached into her coat. She pulled out a small energy crystal and handed it to him. "This is for you. It's for strength." He took it silently and closed his hand around it. When they returned to base, a strange thing happened. Jarrell warriors lined the entrance not to block him, but to honor him. They didn't cheer. That wasn't their way. Instead, they stood tall and gave a slow, respectful nod as Elias passed. Even the young cadets lowered their heads in silence. Elias didn't smile. He didn't wave, but his eyes, tired and worn, showed something stronger than any weapon. Quiet pride. Later, Sira stood in front of the officers. She held up Ilias's broken armor still stored at the base. "This," she said, "is not what protected him." She dropped it on the floor with a heavy thud. "This man did not survive because of our help. He did not ask for our tools, our weapons, or our praise." She looked at her officers one by one. He walked into the frozen wild with nothing, and he came back with honor. The days after Elise's rescue passed in a strange silence. The Jarrell soldiers who had watched him in the proving grounds, who had seen him fight without weapons and survive without armor, began to speak of him differently. There was no mockery now, no scorn, just respect. Commander Sarah Velton stood alone in her office, staring out at the frozen surface of Vector 9. The wind howled outside, but inside it was still, quiet. She had seen Elias perform the impossible, survive, adapt, and lead without ever asking for anything. He had fought alongside her soldiers, saved them, and proved that what they believed about humans was wrong. She reached for a datapad, one of many reports detailing Elias's actions. The datapad showed that the human had saved countless lives. But it also showed the truth she hadn't yet accepted. He hadn't done it for her. He hadn't done it for the Jarrell. He had done it for something deeper. For himself. The next day, Elias was summoned to the command center. Sira had requested his presence, though she didn't know exactly what she planned to say. Only knew that something in her had changed, something that would not be silenced. Elias entered the room, looking just as he always did, tired, beaten, but steady. His eyes were no longer filled with anger, nor with hope. Just calm, Sira gestured for him to sit, and Elias obeyed. She had 1,000 things to say, but all of them felt wrong. Finally, she spoke. "You have proven yourself in ways that no Jarrell has ever been asked to prove." Elias didn't respond. He just waited, as if giving her the time she needed. Sira stood up and walked toward the large window. "I once believed that strength came from weapons, that it came from technology, from power." She turned to face him, her voice softer now. "I thought that humans were nothing more than fragile creatures, hiding behind metal and armor." Elias looked at her, his face unreadable. "I was wrong," Sira continued. "The armor doesn't protect you. It only hides what you truly are." She paused, and for the first time, her voice faltered. "I see that now. You don't need protection." Elias's gaze remained steady, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of understanding. "I don't know how to say this," Sira said, her hand shaking slightly as she spoke. "But I owe you an apology." Elias remained silent. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than words ever. Could she continued, "I mocked you. I called you weak. I believed the lies about humanity. But you've shown us something we've never understood. You've shown us what it truly means to be strong." Her breath caught. She couldn't say the words she wanted to. She couldn't bring herself to speak them, but she couldn't stop herself either. You were right." For a long time, Elias simply sat there, his eyes focused on her, his face calm, almost distant. He had no need to speak either. His mission wasn't about proving anything to Sira or her people. He'd already proven it to himself, and that was all that mattered. Later that evening, the soldiers gathered in the main hall. They had heard what happened, Sira's apology. The respect that had once been quiet now rang through the halls. Elias was no longer just the human soldier who had stumbled onto their planet. He was someone to be admired, someone they could look up to. The younger cadets whispered among themselves, wondering how someone who had nothing could give so much. One cadet, still unsure about the human, turned to his mentor. "Do you think he's just like us? A warrior, but in a different way?" The mentor thought for a moment, then nodded. "He's more than just a warrior. He's something beyond that. He shows us what we can't see ourselves. He's the kind of warrior we need to become." Back in Sira's office, she stared down at the banner Elias had made and placed at the trial pillars. It was simple, just a small patch of cloth and some metal. But to her, it now represented everything Elias had shown her what it truly meant to fight, not with weapons, but with spirit. Not with armor, but with heart. He had taught her that strength was not about power, it was about the will to survive. It's the strength to continue even when everything seemed lost, and in a way that was a power far greater than any technology, any weapon, or any empire. A few days later, Elias stood on the balcony of the command center staring out into the distance. He had no armor now, no weapons, no shields. He was just a man standing in the cold wind. Behind him, Sira walked up silently. She had come to speak to him, to offer words she wasn't sure he wanted to hear. "I don't know what you want from us," Sira said, her voice quiet. "But I know this: you have changed us. You've made us see what we could not." Elias turned slowly, his face calm but firm. "You've made us better," Sira continued. "And I don't know how to thank you for that." Elias nodded once, a small gesture that held more meaning than any speech. "I'm not here to change you," Elias said softly. "I'm here because I'm a human, and humans survive, no matter what." As the days passed, Elise's story spread, far and wide. It wasn't just the Jarrell who had witnessed his strength, it was everyone. Earth, other alien races, even those who had once doubted humanity. And each time they heard the story, they realized the truth. True strength wasn't about power. It was about persistence. It was about humanity. The days on Vector 9 grew quieter. The Jarrell base was still full of life, but now there was a difference. Soldiers who once scoffed at humans, who thought of them as weak, now looked to Elias with a kind of silent respect. His name was no longer spoken with mockery, but with acknowledgement. Commander Sira Velton stood at the window of her office, gazing out at the endless stretch of white snow and jagged mountains. She had seen it. All the arrogance, the mockery, the disbelief in now. She saw the quiet change in her soldiers. In herself, Elias Ward had done more than survive on Vector 9. He had broken something deeper, something not seen in battlefields or in technology. He had shown them what it meant to live without fear of what others thought. He had shown them the strength of humanity. But now, as the days wore on, Sira knew something else was coming. It was inevitable. Elias would have to leave. The peace talks between Earth and the Jarrell were reaching their final stages. The alliance was almost ready. As Elias, as a representative of his people, would be needed elsewhere. Couldn't stay on Vector 9 forever. Elias knew it too. His time on Vector 9 had come to an end. The soldiers who had once considered him an outsider now looked at him like an equal. The young cadets asked him to train them. The veterans came to him for advice. The commander Sira included treated him with the respect earned through trials, not titles. But Elias knew that his mission wasn't just to change their opinions, it was to return home. To make sure that Earth had a future with the Jarrell. He had done what he set out to do, but it was time to go. He stood alone at the edge of the base, looking out over the vast frozen wasteland. He had removed his armor long ago, and he stood in the same simple clothes he had worn when he first arrived, worn and faded. The snow swirled around him, but he didn't move. Sierra walked up quietly behind him, her footsteps muffled. In the snow, she said nothing at first. There was no need for words. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but clear. You've done it. The talks between Earth and the Jarrell are almost finished. I don't know what you've shown us, but it was enough. Elias didn't turn to look at her. I didn't show you anything, he replied quietly. I just did what I had to do. Sierra nodded, understanding. It's more than that. You didn't just survive. You proved that sometimes we don't need armor to be strong. Elias finally turned to face her. His face was tired, but there was a calm in his eyes, one that had never been there before. I never needed armor, he said, but humans don't. Need armor to survive? We just need to keep going. Sierra took a deep breath, and we've seen that. Maybe for the first time, I understand what true strength really is. Elias said nothing. He simply looked at her, and there was a quiet understanding between them. The day Elias was scheduled to leave came too quickly. The Jarrell base was full of activity, preparing for the final transfer of the peace accords. It was a big moment for both Earth and the Jarrell, and Elias's presence had played a crucial role. Sierra stood at the landing pad, her hands clasped behind her back. The shuttle was already waiting. Soldiers lined the platform, watching silently. They had all gathered to say goodbye to the human who had shown them something more important than battle tactics, something more important than victory. Elias stepped forward, his simple clothes still covered in dirt and scars. His eyes were calm, but there was a quiet sadness in them. It wasn't about leaving the Jarrell, it was about leaving the lessons he had learned behind. As he passed Sarah, he stopped for a moment. I'll remember this, he said. I'll remember what I learned here, not from the battles, but from all of you. Sarah's voice was soft. And I'll remember you, Elias Ward, not as a human, but as someone who taught us all what it really means to survive. He nodded once, a small but meaningful gesture. He turned and walked toward the shuttle. And as he did, the Jarrell soldiers slowly began to raise their hands in a silent salute. Inside the shuttle, Elias took one last look at the planet that had changed his life. He wasn't the same man who had arrived on Vector-9 looking for answers. He was stronger now, not because of what he had done, but because of what he had become. His armor was gone. His weapons had no place anymore. What he had gained on Vector-9 wasn't just respect from an alien race. It was a deeper understanding of his own humanity. The strength to continue, to move forward no matter the challenge. As the shuttle's engines hummed to life, Elias looked out the window, watching the frozen moon disappear into the distance. He had walked into the unknown, without armor, without weapons. And he had come out the other side stronger than ever. Humanity was stronger than anyone had ever given them credit for, and that strength would be enough to change the universe. The shuttle lifted off, disappearing into the vastness of space, carrying a message far more important than any treaty or agreement. It carried the promise that humanity, without armor, without fear, could rise above any challenge. And it was only just beginning.